Sorry, is my voice I sound like a chipmunk. Is this better? Let me know if this fixed the okay. All right. I don't know. I think this headset has been glitching. You are not the first ones to tell me. Anyway, let me start over real quick. I am in Los Angeles, California, and I am reporting on the Danny Masterson rape trial. Okay. And this is what I was talking about. I saw somebody go ahead and clip it. I think, yeah, I would love to see it. I have no idea what was happening with my microphone, but somebody said I sound like a chipmunk, like I'm on helium. Anyway, he has family there. About 8 members of his family were seated to. Thank you, Pixie Doll. Much better. We're seated to the left, so including Jordan Masterson, his half brother, his mother, and I believe his wife, and several other members that I just do not recognize because I don't know that family all that well. But um, Scientology is very heavily involved in this whole thing, right? Um, it's so okay. Let's go back. I want to start with this article here real quick, so you all understand the position that even his lawyers had to take in this case. Danny Masterson's criminal defense attorney, Philip Cohen, who was in the courtroom today, along with Goldstein, I think is his co-counsel, admits in open court that Scientology's reputation is toxic. Now, Scientology, like I said, is going to be playing a huge role in our conversation today. That's him. He was wearing a light blue checkered suit. And he was the only one with a like wearing color. Everyone else was wearing kind of like a somber dark blue suit, and he was the only one that kind of like stuck out like a sore thumb. But I don't know, maybe it was intentional, maybe just his personality. I have no idea. Maybe he thought closing arguments will be today. I have no clue. This was a couple months, or excuse me, a few weeks ago, about 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. In a stunning development today, Danny Masterson's criminal defense attorney, Philip Cohen, admitted in open court that the Church of Scientology's reputation was so horrible that even the mere mention of the word Scientology at trial would hurt his client's chance for a fair trial. Now, Philip Cohen publicly threw the Church of Scientology under the bus in a desperate last-minute bid to delay the start of the Danny Masterson's criminal trial next week on October 11th. So that started 4 weeks ago. And there's a theme here. If you all remember, this case had been continued on several occasions. And basically, it seems like the only strategy the defense had was delay, which is already suspicious. Normally, the losing side is going to be the one asking for delays. Winning sides usually don't ask for delays. They want to get the show on the road because they're confident in their case. Scientologist Danny Masterson, this is the man on trial, actor from that 70s show and from that ranch or whatever, that 70s ranch, I think it was, attended court today. As a Scientologist, Danny Masterson knows damn well it is a high crime in Scientology to bring the Church of Scientology into public disrepute. But what else could Masterson do? He had run out of options. Masterson spent millions of dollars in legal bills, looking for every possible way to get the case against him dismissed. When these attempts failed and he was bound over for criminal trial, Masterson next used every possible means to delay his trial. So he tried to get it dismissed first, failed. Then he's like, just delay it as long as possible. It's like, I'm going to be found guilty already, right? But you can't predict the future. You can't predict the future, but we will be predicting the future today as I continue. I have another notebook By the way, I love the inscription on it. I absolutely grabbed this notebook that just says "I can" and "I will." I don't know. It spoke to me. It spoke to me. So I got my notes in here, and we'll be going over those shortly. From my experience in court today, Masterson was successful in getting a series of delays, but that came to an end. In his frantic effort to get yet one more delay, Scientologist Danny Masterson, a high stakes poker player, doubled down. He and his attorney openly confirmed Scientology's well earned reputation for being the worst of the worst religious cults in the world. Wow. So not only is he going to get like probably convicted, he's also burned all bridges with the Scientology community. I mean, he's completely, other than his family, he's cut off from like the rest of the world because Scientology was a huge part of his life, as I understand it. This was Masterson's big bet. Scientology is so awful that his criminal trial must be delayed for a little while longer, but that's a terrible bet. We explain why he argued this way in the next section. Scientology leader David Miscavige is surely apoplectic with rage over Scientology being publicly pilloried as a pariah by Philip Cohen and his client Danny Masterson. In open court. Worse, the Church of Scientology is so inextricably entangled in the Danny Masterson criminal trial that Miscavige cannot do anything to brutally punish Danny Masterson, as is Miscavige's chronic and preferred method of handling those who transgress or oppose his imperious will. I mean, this is literally terrifying. This is actually terrifying to read. The truth of the matter is that David Miscavige has no one but himself to blame. If Miscavige had long ago handled the knowledge reports accusing Danny Masterson of raping several women who were Scientologists, then he would not be where he is at today. However, Miscavige refused to handle the matter because L. Ron Hubbard, by the way, the guy who started Scientology like some 50, 60 years ago, it's a I don't want to offend anyone out there, but it's a fictional religion. All of them are fictional, granted, but this one is only like, it's not even 100 years old. It was literally started by this guy who was writing fictional novels. You know, you can argue all day long which, my religion is better than yours because mine is 5,500 years old and yours is only 2,000 and yours is only 1,500. I'm referring to Judaic, Christian, and Muslim religions, of course. What about the Buddhist and the Shintoist? Those are also like 6,000 or 7,000 years old, right? I mean, anyway, L. Ron Hubbard's policy forbids Scientologists from reporting other Scientologists to the police. What? What? Miscavige, whatever. I don't care, but thank you. That is not a religion. That is not even a cult. That's a mafia. Embedded in the religion, L. Ron Hubbard was like, you know what? I want to make sure that we're all protecting each other. So if you commit a crime against another Scientologist, we're going to sort it out ourselves. Don't go to the police. That is insanity. That is absolute insanity. Thus, David Miscavige and OSA, engaged in a cover-up of Masterson alleged rapes and intimidated and threatened Masterson's victims. That's why, all these allegations, they happened back in 01, 03, and that's why they're coming to light 20 years later. This is why Scientology and Danny Masterson find themselves headed into a very serious felony criminal trial, which is exactly where we are today, almost at its conclusion. Attorney Cohen's justification for making his rather spectacular denunciation of Scientology arose as a result of the Los Angeles mayoral race. As we reported, Los Angeles mayoral candidate and billionaire real estate developer Rick Caruso has been airing campaign ads on television for his opponent, Congressman Kara Bass's appearance at a 2010 Scientology event. At that event, Bass spoke alongside David Miscavige and now disgraced LA Sheriff Lee Baca, who has been a long-term Scientology ally and supporter. Caruso's ads show snippets of Karen Bass's appearance at the Scientology event and use these to call her judgment and abilities of discernment into question. One of the screenshots below from the YouTube video used by Caruso's campaign shows a smiling Karen Bass heaping lavish praise upon Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. It is actually quite an embarrassment to watch. Caruso's campaign has scored points by exposing Bass's association with Scientology. And there it is. Grand opening Church of Scientology in Los Angeles, California. Caruso's exposure of Bass's appearance and speech at the 2010 Scientology's event went viral. Naturally so. And Representative Bass of California's 37th District tried to do damage control with a tweet in which she speaks of Scientology having been exposed in books, interviews, and documentaries. However, Bass offered no particulars of what has been exposed about Scientology. If anything, Bass's tweets was a deflection in which she wants it both ways. She wants to say she respects the beliefs of others while vaguely stating Scientology has been exposed. Typical politician, playing both sides of the fence. This vacuous equivocation on Bass's part is meaningless and weak. Representative Bass would have done well to have had Leah remaining next to her at a press conference and to have an unequivocal statement denouncing the human rights abuses of the Church of Scientology. While realizing that she had undershot her tweet, Bass amped it up. As further reported, she publicly condemned Scientology on an unequivocal basis, and her campaign released a statement. Blah, blah, blah. Politics. We don't care. But this is why Danny Masterson's lawyer argued that having both Los Angeles mayoral candidates simultaneously portraying Scientology as sinister cult prejudiced his client's chances at a fair trial. As reported by Neil Blinkow for thedailymail.com, Attorney Cohen continued his efforts to separate Masterson from the notoriety of Scientology, telling the court that any moves mayoral candidates Representative Bass and Caruso make to distance themselves from Scientology give them a better chance of being elected mayor of Los Angeles. This is a really big problem for Mr. Masterson. There's a really negative view of Scientology, and every time Scientology is mentioned, it becomes harder and harder for Mr. Masterson to have a fair trial. But this is a huge point in the trial, and actually it's a huge point for the defense too, because their argument that Scientology has somehow hindered the women's ability to come forward and to have charges pressed against Masterson, I mean, that goes to their state of mind. And, if they're going to be using that as quote unquote an excuse, maybe it's not a good enough excuse. I don't know. It just seems like, again, I think Cohen is having it both ways. It's like an attempt to delay, but at the same time, I guarantee that during the trial, he used a lot of these concepts. Telling the court that the general public's view of Scientology is more negative than any other religion, Cohen added, there is significant chance of prejudice in the jury in bringing Scientology into the case. Cohen asked the judge to exclude even mentioning the word Scientology during the Masterson trial, which did not happen, by the way, arguing that would be irrelevant, inflammatory, confusing to the jury, and violate his client's First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights. Today, during the reading of the jury instructions, the judge absolutely said that any mentions of Scientology may be considered. Basically, they go to the weight, but you can't use it as a determinative factor. The exact words that she used is Scientology stuff basically is not being admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. Those were her exact words, and we'll come back to that momentarily as I'm looking at my notes here from today. He said a jury could reach an emotional verdict based on Masterson's association with Scientology. Now, that's bullshit. That is complete bullshit. Just based on that, that's not enough. Attorney Cohen argued to Judge Almeida that Masterson's criminal trial should be postponed until after the November 8th elections in LA Judge Almeida is expected to rule tomorrow on the Cohen's requested delay for trial. And I imagine she said no because the trial went. Obviously, the trial is set to begin October 11th. Yeah. Tony Ortega, by the way, who is seated in the media section. He does a lot of videos. I know about this trial. I actually came up. I said hello to him. I introduced myself, and he was and I was like, just wanted to say hi. I don't know if you're familiar with me. And I said my name and my title, the DUI guy, and he's like, no, I've never heard of you. And I was like, all right, buddy. Walked away. I was like, you're lost, man. We could have had a conversation, but he was very taken aback. Like he was very closed off. I'm not sure why. Maybe because he's a reporter, and but not all reporters are like that. I don't know. He seems like a good guy. Maybe he just thought I'm some rando. But you know, you got to be careful. You got to treat all randos equally, because you never know. Some rando might be a YouTube channel with 250,000 subscribers who could have potentially given you a boost, and now you're not going to get it because you brushed me off and sent me packing. So you're lost, buddy. There was some interesting discussion in the afternoon session about Cohen's argument that the word Scientology should be left out of the trial and replaced by something more neutral, like the church or the club, without identifying it to the jurors. He said, paraphrasing, I think the first issue is there is some type of prejudice that attaches to Mr. Masterson for being associated, in this case, with Scientology. Gallup polls sought to get people's take on it. Scientology won out as the most nefarious, notorious religion. Only added to that with info from this case, which I think is incredibly illustrative and demonstrative because it doesn't come from the defense. These are objective, unrelated, independent people who happen to be mayoral candidates. I believe the more they attach opposition to Scientology and distance themselves from Scientology, the more prejudice there is. Every time the word is mentioned at the trial, it becomes harder and harder to get a fair trial on what he's actually charged with. A simple case in terms of basically he said, she said. I don't know. Almeida's response, again paraphrasing, putting aside the veracity of negative campaign ads, how is Scientology more inflammatory than, let's say, evidence regarding gangs or white supremacy or motorcycle gangs? So fucking true. I agree with Judge Almeida. Or evidence of serial killer Richard Ramirez being a serial killer. Negative evidence comes in all the time. All the time. Exactly. Whether it's organizational or individual. Those things there are things far more negative than Scientology. They're not so inflammatory that excluded from court. Judge Almeida backed Cohen into a corner in which he would have to argue that, yes, Scientology is worse than white supremacy, serial killers, and drug cartel and murders where people's heads are decapitated. Your move, Mr. Cohen. It's a hell of a way to put it. Philip Cohen's efforts to separate Masterson from the notoriety of Scientology are doomed to fail at trial, and I imagine they did. Gunnar, thank you. Scientologists often try this trick in almost every trial. They bring up the fact that their well-deserved bad reputation to try and get relevant facts ruled off limits. That's so true. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's like the worst move, but it seems like the most brilliant, but I think it's terrible. Masterson has been very visible and outspoken member of Scientology. For example, he appeared regularly at the Celebrity Center's annual Christmas Gala with his fellow Scientology celebrities, left to right, Jenna Elfman, Laura Prepon, Erica Christensen, and Danny Masterson. I recognize this face. She was in a few shows, Laura Prepon. And I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't think we need to keep going. I just wanted to give you guys kind of an intro about Scientology, okay? So now let's get into a little bit of the allegations. So we have 3 Jane Does, right? And there's a 4th Jane Doe, which is not charged in the indictment against Danny Masterson. So the way indictments work is a little bit different than like misdemeanor charges. Misdemeanor charges, you can pretty much add, remove as the prosecution without any concern whatsoever. However, when it comes to felony charges, and these are felony charges, they can't simply start adding and removing charges, okay? So whatever the grand jury indicted on, and the grand jury indicted on 3 women: Jane Doe number 1, Jane Doe number 2, and Jane Doe number 3. One of them, by the way, I think it was Jane Doe number 2, he was in a relationship with for like 4 or 5 years. And the allegation is that each time that they had intercourse, it was a separate count of sexual assault and rape, which is kind of wild to think about. Like she was kind of almost like she felt like she couldn't leave, I suppose, which is, I mean, I can't imagine how tormenting it would be on an individual who's like, I do not want you in my life, but I have no choice because we're both Scientologists and I'm stuck in this. Another one was just one incident. And another one was, I believe, several incidents, or at least one incident between the course of like 2 or 3 months. So, and then the fourth one I know very little about because that was Jane Doe number 4. She testified last week. If she testified, I believe she did because the court talked about it. Okay. Now, with that out of the way, and you're welcome to do your own research and add on to this. I just wanted to give you a brief umbrella view of what's going on in Scientology. Now let's get into the courtroom, okay? So, first and foremost, when I arrived this morning, I did not know that Harvey Weinstein's case is happening across the hall. Absolutely every religion has a dirty past, says Ryo Baby. With Scientology being so new, it's ripe with corruption. Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's no question about it. Harvey Weinstein. So I'm standing in line. I'm waiting to get in. And there's like some argument about how there are only so many seats. There are only like 18 seats for the public. And I'm like, wow, there's like a lot of people. There's like 8 or 9 media. Everybody's talking and all that. And I'm trying to figure out who's who and what's what. And I get behind this line, like this lady announces that if you want to get in, we are limited seating. And I ask like, how many seats do we have? And something like that. And she goes, oh, and I get behind this lady and I start talking to her. And she's like, yeah, we have this is abnormal. There are a lot of people in line today. And I'm like, ooh, is that because you imagine Danny is going to take the stand? And she's like, who? I go, do you think that there's such a big line today because you anticipate and people anticipate that Danny Masterson is going to take the stand in his own defense today? Is that why there's so many people here? And she's like, oh, this is the Harvey Weinstein trial. Danny Masterson is over there down the hallway. And I'm like, oh shit. So then she's like, oh, you're going to have no problem getting in there. And she was right. Danny Masterson has absolutely zero public support. Zero. Harvey Weinstein, I don't know if it's public support, public curiosity. It was kind of like very reminiscent of Johnny Depp. It's like 99% women. Danny Masterson doesn't have a single woman. The only women in the courtroom are the prosecutor, 2 of his lawyers, one which they conveniently seated right next to Danny. I don't know, to make him look more innocent. I have no idea. His family, there are several women in his family there. A few reporters, and there was a husband and wife that came in. Every other single member of the public, and there was about at one point, I think like 8 of us. When I came in, I was the only one, by the way. I was the only one when I first came in at 9:05 in the morning. Shortly thereafter, there were no like 8 people, 7 males, 1 female, and she was the wife of one of the males there. I don't know. It was really bizarre. Cohen obviously is the guy representing him, the primary criminal defense attorney who replaced, what's his name? The guy with the gray hair that was representing Danny previously. And then, of course, the main head prosecutor is a male as well, in a little bit older. And he's a really, really confident man. I really like him a lot. So also about 7 or 8 media members, Tony being one of them. So yeah, I have the initial notes are literally about the Jerry for Harvey Weinstein. So we're not going to get into that. I was like, oh shit, wrong line. I was in the Harvey Weinstein line, which is across the hall on the other end of the floor. And I walk in right when a bench conference is happening in the Danny Masterson trial. The jury is not present in the room yet. Judge Olmedo is a really, really cool judge. I like her a lot. I like her a lot. So at the moment I walk in, there were like no members of the public. I thought that there were like a few, but they were all family, and you don't count those as public. I was one person in the public, and 9 members of the media seated behind me. Now, as soon as the bench conference is over, the judge asks the prosecution, because I guess on Friday afternoon, prosecution rested, or Friday evening, and the judge kind of reiterates, has the prosecution still, are you still resting kind of thing. It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of joke sort of thing. So the prosecution rests. And the judge turns to the defense. Do you have any witnesses that you wish to call? And the defense calls no witnesses. Not one, not even Danny. Danny Masterson will not, has not testified, and will not testify in his own defense. That says a lot. It is dangerous, sure, but the jurors are people. They want to hear it from the horse's mouth. And if the horse's mouth doesn't speak, that's problematic. And I get it. It's a defense strategy. And there is an instruction that the judge read today, which we'll get to in a moment, that you cannot use the fact that a defendant did not testify in his own defense against them. Okay? Danny says that after speaking with counsel, he does not wish to testify. The judge asks him directly. So she like kind of paused everything, looked at Danny and said, look, you have an option to testify or not to testify. The choice is entirely yours. I just want to make sure if you spoke to your lawyers and they explained to you like the ramifications of you testifying, the ramifications of you not testifying, do you understand everything? And he goes, yes. She says, with all of that in mind, do you still wish not to testify? And he says, no, Your Honor. And that's it. He's not going to testify. Now, the judge kind of asked, is it okay to do closing arguments today? Is it possible to start them in the afternoon? And the prosecutor said no, because they go first, probably in California. I don't know yet. I'm going to figure that out. Or maybe the defense goes first, the prosecution is just not ready and they want to go on the same day. I don't know. Basically, the prosecutor said, we're not ready yet. We need more time. We need until tomorrow, which was the original plan, as I understand it. Anyway, the judge was trying to see if we can like move this thing along. Closing arguments are pushed to tomorrow, and the prosecution rested, like I said. So we have 3 Jane Does that testified. They're the primary witnesses. The judge went on to prepare jury instructions. Apparently, so very interesting. In California, jury instructions are very structured. They have this book, which we're going to look in just a moment, on at least one instruction number 1000, which is rape by force, fear, or threats. And all of these are numbered. The judge literally reads numbers. Like, we're going to do instruction number 257, 250. Like, she starts with like 101, 102, 203, 204, 237, 437, and like literally reads numbers. It's very fascinating. In California, they have like this book. And this book contains like all of these jury instructions. And of course, instruction 1000, which is the most important one, forcible rape, right? Because there are multiple degrees of rape. Then number 1000 is forcible rape, which we'll get to in a moment. So they argue kind of back and forth. There's a rape trauma instruction. There's a prior sexual intercourse instruction. Now, very, very, very important. There is something in law known as lesser included offenses, okay? Lesser included offenses are an election by the defense. Usually, prosecution doesn't charge those. Sometimes they do, but usually it's kind of like a defense strategy as to whether or not they want to include lesser included offenses. What does that mean? That means they can give the jury the option, like let's say in a murder case, okay? Or actually, we can use this one in a rape case, right? You have like the first degree, worst possible forcible rape, right? That's probably basically first degree rape by force, by physical force. You can have lesser included, like sexual assault or just assault or battery or something like that. The defense is asked by the judge, would you like us to include lesser included offenses? Or is it your defense strategy to not include them? And Mr. Cohen goes, we do not want any lesser included offenses, Your Honor. So they're going for the whole kit and caboodle or nothing. Like it's all in or bust. The defense is not taking the middle ground. The same with the prosecution. The prosecution is all in or bust. And the judge, you got to pay attention to body language. And I'm only there literally at this point for like maybe 30 minutes, less than an hour. And I can kind of notice the judge, justifiably so. Sometimes judges give away their bias, but not always. I mean, Judge Ascarati, I think, was in the Johnny Depp trial, was able to appear very, very neutral and fair to both sides. But here, and again, that was a civil case, granted. This one is a criminal case, so it's a little bit different. But the judge is kind of leaning towards, you can see she's kind of like her body language, she's kind of turned towards the prosecution. And when she talks to the defense, like she just kind of moves her head, which is, again, it's just these little things you have to watch and look for and kind of build up a record as to what is happening, what is going on, who's on what side, who's like, what's the aura in the room? Like, what do you smell in the room? And I don't mean like using your olfactory sense to actually smell. How does the vibe feel? Where is the energy permeating? I know these concepts may seem like they're used by certain individuals who may like, I read the horoscope every morning. Not necessarily. You can simply use these same elements in trying to decipher how has the trial gone so far based on the attitudes, emotions, and feelings that people have towards one another in the courtroom. Very, very important. Also, let me take this moment to say, don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell if you haven't already. So yeah, let's keep going. All right. I have actually made a note here that they sat a female attorney next to Masterson, and I literally wrote, I'm not sure if that worked. The defendant... Now, okay, the defense was arguing a very interesting point today. So in cases of forcible rape or any kind of rape or sexual assault, there is more than one instance of rape, like in Jane Doe number 2, I think it was, where there's a whole conduct of like a 5-year-long relationship. The defense was trying to argue that the judge has to agree on which like incident, like one incident. They have to, if they have to unanimously agree. That's a given, right? In criminal cases, jurors have to be unanimous. All 12 must say yay, guilty, or nay, not guilty. Even if there's one absconding, just one, that's a hung jury. Remember 12 Angry Men with Jane Fonda. Classic, by the way. If you haven't seen it, absolutely recommend it. Well, the defense was trying to say, look, Your Honor, other than unanimity with respect to conviction or acquittal, we also need unanimity as to which act they agree on. Because, like, in theory, Your Honor, we could have this. Juror number 1 will say the act from, Jane Doe number 1 in 2001, I think he did it. And then juror number 3 will say, well, I disagree with that one, but I believe that the act in 2003 in March was the one with Jane Doe number 2, and then someone else, juror number 9 will say, well, Jane Doe number 3 in February was what I believe, and they all disagree about which charge, and they all have to be unanimous about which charge, not which charge, but which incident, excuse me, they're going after. And the judge was not having it. The judge was like, okay, look, if you can give me case law that says that, I will be more than happy to. And they tried the whole, we don't want to confuse the jury type argument. It failed with flying colors. It was a good try. It was definitely a good try, but the defense failed with flying colors. The judge disagreed, and she said that it doesn't matter. Continuous, she read an instruction. She said, continuous course of conduct does not require unanimity. That's what her rules say. That's what her rules say. There are no cameras in the courtroom, Pam. There's one security camera in the corner. I checked. Every judge has a choice to make whether or not they're going to televise the case to the public. And I think to protect not just the parties involved, but I think more so to protect the victims, Jane Doe's 1, 2, 3, and now 4. The judge made the right call because all their faces would be appearing on national television. She did not want it. She did not want it, and I think it was the right call. This is not one of those cases you want televised, honestly. Both as a victim and as a viewer. I think a lot of people would have been very upset that she, because then the whole fucking point of Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 3 all goes out the window. Goes, oh my God, I know her. That's Erica Green. I went to high school with her. And then everybody's like, oh, Erica Green? Oh, da, da, da. I just threw a random name out, just so you know. But like, that's, people's faces. What are you going to do? Blur them out? No. What did I say? Did I say Jane Fonda? I meant Henry Fonda. Did I say Jane Fonda? I probably did say Jane Fonda, didn't I? Henry Fonda. Sorry. My brain is running at like 100 miles a minute. So you'll have to excuse me today. I've been up very early. So yeah, this is where I make the note of, I noticed the suits, six suits in the courtroom, basically. The primary ones, the lawyers, and Danny Masterson himself. And the only one, Philip Cohen, is the one wearing a bright blue checkered suit that really stands out. And blue is normally an honest color. It's supposed to be depicting kind of like honesty and being an honest color. But I'm telling you, it did not give the same vibe in the courtroom today. It didn't give the same feeling. That's just my impression. At 9:55 a.m., they call the jurors in. Or at least they try to. But here's the problem. The clerk passes a note to the judge. The judge sighs very heavily and seems visibly upset, asks the lawyers to come up to the bench. The public at this point is 6 people deep, counting myself, around 10 a.m. So we take a short recess, 10 a.m. to 10:15, and we come back. The judge had modified some jury instructions to include some time periods. So it was a big point by the defense asking for time periods for each count for each victim so that we know when it happened, so that the jurors can make a proper decision. Now it's revealed to the world what on earth happened. Turns out one of the jurors, juror number 11, has allegedly, or at least called in and said that they tested positive for COVID-19 on Sunday and therefore will be unable to come into court. Now, the judge immediately, of course, tries to figure out a little bit more details. Turns out they were symptomatic on Saturday, so not Friday. So the parties in the litigation did not have to worry about what if they're going to need to test themselves and so on. And juror number 11 is just going to be, replaced by an alternate, says the judge. Does anybody have any objection to it? The defense, after a brief discussion amongst themselves, refuses to stipulate and objects to exchanging juror number 11 for another juror. That was really bizarre. Now, I think juror number 11 is their actual number. In order to not confuse you, I'm going to refer to them by the numbers that they're seated, okay? So it's actually juror number 7, and I only learned that later when the jury came in. So it's because they have numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like in the Johnny Depp trial. Pretty much exact same thing. All the seats are filled because it's a criminal trial, and it's not a jury of 9 later down to 7. It's actually a jury of 16, which is going to be narrowed down tomorrow to 12. Okay, there's still about 4 alternates, so there are 16 jurors in the room, but they're not there yet. They're not there yet. We're going to get to that in just a moment. So juror number 7 is going to be replaced. We don't know by whom yet. The clerk will read that in a moment when the jury comes in. But the defense is like, we don't agree. Well, the court excuses them anyway. She says, we find good cause over defendant's objection, and we'll seat an alternate when they get here. Now, by 10:30, the 3 family members, started out as 3 family members, are now 8 deep. There are now 8 family members, and as a matter of fact, during the recess, Jordan Masterson, his brother, or half-brother, is seen in the hallway shaking hands and hugging Cohen, their attorney, and is walking towards the courtroom and is seated in the far corner. I think people recognized him. So 8 family members are seated by Danny on his side, including his brother. And I even make a note like, does Danny have a brother? I had to research this later on. That's Jordan. Jordan is 100% there. Another short break for a judge to type up some more jury instructions. Danny, now this one is big. Oh my God! Again, as a people reader, as someone who does this shit for a living, you pay attention to the little things, right? As we're having a break at like 10:30 in the morning, I swear to you, I just looked at Danny just to kind of like see what he's up to. He is seated upright like this. He is rigid. He's barely moving. His hands are right here. Both of his hands are right up here at his mouth. And he's sitting like a statue. He's not fucking moving. He barely moves like an inch. His hands to his face. He appears to be very tense. Not really giving a very innocent vibe. Just my own personal observation. Like, for instance, compare him to Johnny. Now, when Johnny would walk in to the courtroom, Johnny Depp is who I'm talking about. When he would walk into the courtroom, Johnny was like relaxed. He was happy. He was waving at everybody. He was carefree. He was just present. He's got a smile on his face. He was happy. He was pleasant. He was, I don't know. Whereas Danny Masterson is sitting there like very, very tense, very tight. Like there's like a permanent mortified look etched on his face is the best way I can describe it. I don't think this man has been sleeping for the last 4 weeks. Legitimately. I think he wakes up in the middle of the night worried because I think he knows what's coming. Like his head's in the guillotine and the lever is about to be pulled. Now, at 10:40, when court resumes once again, the defense makes a motion to dismiss. This is typically known as a motion for directed verdict. To a lot of you, you hear these words and you go, motion to dismiss? What? Standard stuff. The defense, it's actually malpractice, in my opinion, to not make that motion, because if you don't make that motion and it could have been in theory granted, or even if it wouldn't have, you would still have to fight a malpractice lawsuit arguing that it wouldn't have, and nobody wants that. All it takes is stand up. He literally said like 3 sentences. It took him less than 60 seconds, and he sat down. The judge barely looked at Cohen as he argued the motion to dismiss. He spoke very quietly. He was very short, lacked in confidence and fervor in his argument because he knows he's going to lose that motion. The judge, of course, looks at the prosecution, Prosecution says like a couple sentences in response. It gets denied, and 10:45 the jurors come in. Now let's talk about the jurors in the Danny Masterson case. With the excuse of juror number 7, who had COVID, there are 16 jurors that remain. 12 jurors are going to be seated who are going to be deciding the case and go back to deliberate, and there are 4 alternates. They're divided down the middle, 8 men and 8 women. 5 of them are wearing masks. They're of all races and color: white, African American, Asian, Hispanic. There are several mixed races. I mean, it's California. It's kind of what you expect. The one juror that was replaced, number 7, is replaced with number 13, and 13 is a young white female. I don't know who juror number 7 was. Maybe some of the other reporters have reported on it. I found that it's very interesting, like the kind of stuff that I cover. I don't know why most reporters don't cover this stuff. I think it's so fascinating that, like, I even said it, that one of the reasons, actually the reason I went to the Johnny Depp trial is because I was like, look, you have all these people who are not looking at the people who are going to be deciding the case. Like, that's obscene. Why is nobody looking at it? Why is nobody talking about them? You don't have to reveal like what they're wearing and their age and their, like you don't have to reveal particularities about them. Just talk about the fact that they're there. I don't know. But I think this is like literally the most interesting stuff, honestly. So the judge launches into the instructions. She lets them know that testimony is over, that the prosecution has rested, and so has the defense. And next will come closing arguments, and that they will be doing those tomorrow at 9:00 in the morning. The jurors did not seem to mind. I guess it's been 4 weeks. They're probably already tired. I was trying to see how they would respond, if at all, if any, to the fact that Danny did not testify and is not going to testify. It was hard to get a good read. They were very stoic. They were very solemn and tense themselves, which is not a good sign in a criminal case. You want jurors that are more relaxed. Relaxed jurors acquit. Tense jurors convict. That's the mantra. Scientology stuff, as I said, is not going to be admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. So any discussions about Scientology, the judge tells the jurors in her preliminary instructions, which, by the way, took forever. They were extremely long, and they went in depth into like a bunch of different little stuff about circumstantial evidence and testimony and hearsay and this and that. Covered everything. I've never seen such a comprehensive set of preliminary instructions before you even get to the charges themselves in my life. So there's some similarities to what I'm familiar with, and then there's lots of stark differences, and let's get to those in a moment. Also, harassing and stalking testimony, because those are not some of the charges, are also not being admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. So there's been some testimony about Danny, I guess, and maybe other Scientologists harassing these women, but that testimony is not directly related to any charges. So those they can simply take in with them to the courtroom, to the deliberation room, and simply take that into consideration. But it's not, he's not charged with harassment or stalking. The jurors are all very solemn. This is when I wrote that in my notes. The fact that Danny Masterson owned a firearm is stipulated. Apparently, he used that as an intimidation or something at one point. I'm not sure. There's even a moment where the prosecution tries to, in the jury instructions. Hold on 1 second. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, the Scientologists have come to arrest me, so I told them to fuck off. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so the fact that there was even one moment when the prosecution has tried to argue that there was discussion about a semi-automatic handgun or something like that. Like, according to one of the Jane Does, their testimony was that Danny Masterson owned a firearm, owned a handgun that was not a revolver. That was the testimony. So they tried to argue that it was a semi-automatic weapon, which, again, semi-automatic, as I understand it, ranges from, it has a wide range of what semi-automatic means, right? So the defense was like, we're not happy with that word. Can we use a different one? Like, you can use handgun or whatever. I guess they just used firearm. That was one of the allegations of the Jane Doe. Now, also another Jane Doe, there was a stipulation that she got paid $400,000 in a confidential settlement from Masterson. This is the one that I think was in a long-term relationship with him. And I think I have an article here that I was looking up earlier. Let me see if I can find it. There was a lawsuit that is still currently pending. I think this is it. I believe this is it. Danny Masterson's slam. This is a civil case running parallel. So that one of them was settled, and she got $400,000 in a confidential settlement, which I don't know what's confidential about it. I guess the number is public because the judge literally read it to the jury. Danny Masterson, and that's big, by the way, for the jury to know that there has been a settlement in a civil case. Yeah, exactly. Even an AK-47 is a semi-automatic. It's kind of it's loaded. It's a loaded statement. Oh, and by the way, let me just take a moment real quick. I know I kind of made this whole thing about the comparing him to Johnny Depp. I am not comparing him to Johnny Depp. I'm just comparing Danny's demeanor to Johnny Depp's demeanor. This seems to be like a case where, if you read the title of this video, he fucking did it, probably. And he's going to get convicted, almost definitely. You heard it here first, folks. I'm going to stand by it. I never make speculations on when it comes to that kind of stuff. I make educated guesses based on the data received. And what I saw in that courtroom today, and we haven't even gotten to the juicy stuff yet, you will see why I came to that conclusion. Because them just being solemn and somber, that's not enough. That's not enough. 4 women have accused the actor and the Church of Scientology of participating in a conspiracy to cover up his alleged actions. According to court documents exclusively obtained by E! News, the court ordered that the 2 Jane Does and Chrissy Bixler settle their claims against Danny Masterson and the Church of Scientology per the religious arbitration agreement they signed upon their initiation to the church. So, by the way, when it comes to litigation, when the jury's out of the room, they refer to these women by their initials, like CB, NT, JB. But when the jury is in the room, they call them Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 3, which might, I don't know, like how you keep track of it, but it gets really, really confusing, I think, for the lawyers, not the jurors. Maybe the jurors as well. I don't know. But so yeah, the court documents obtained exclusively by e-news. However, Babette Rials never. How do you? Don't you just love it when the X just plays it and you can't close it? I don't know. Whatever. Never joined the church and is thus excluded from arbitration with the court deciding on a later date if her claims will go to trial. In a statement, Masterson's attorney, Andrew Bretler, said this was absolutely the correct result. We look forward to arbitrating the claims as the court directed. For more about the case, continue reading. So the 4 women are suing him civilly for money. Okay, so that's running parallel. And the jury knows about it now. As of a couple hours ago, the jurors were informed of the fact that other than this criminal case, one of the victims, Jane Doe number 2, I think, got paid $400,000 in confidential settlement. And there's another lawsuit by these women, 4 women, against Danny Masterson and Scientology that is currently pending. They all now know this stuff, and that is terrifying. Again, for me as sitting in the defense attorney's shoes, sitting in the shoes of the defendant, for the jurors to know that this is not normally this stuff doesn't come in. I don't know how it came in. I have no idea. Usually this stuff is not, jurors don't get to find out about this stuff. It's probably not enough for a mistrial, but like I said, I wasn't there when it was all read. So like I said, during the instructional phase, juror number 7 is replaced by number 13, which is a young female. So she seems pretty happy to be going from the alternate camp to the I'm actually going to go in and listen to this. I like how Kentucky does it better because like all 16 or 14 or in a jury of 6, all 7 or 8 sit and listen to all the testimony, and nobody knows who's going to be the alternate until the very end. It's kind of hard knowing from the beginning of the trial that you are an alternate to take the case seriously. So I don't know. She was very ecstatic to be joined in, which is not a good sign for Danny. In a rape case, for a juror to be pretty excited, I mean, she tried to hide it, and she hid it very, very well. If you pay attention, you could see it. It was very hard to miss if you paid attention. She was like, she wanted to be on that jury. She wanted to be on that jury. Now, the one thing that baffles me, and you all may not see it from my perspective because I'm an attorney and I've been doing this stuff and I actually litigated cases and I've heard other jurisdictions like Kentucky and Virginia and how they treat these. Notes can. In California, jurors can use their notes during deliberations. What? That is unprecedented. Notes can be taken for purposes of deliberation. That is, I even wrote, that is the first time I have ever seen this in my life. The judge even literally said, like, your notes do not take precedence over, like, your memory. Your memory can be faulty. Your notes can be faulty. If you have a question about something in your notes, we can take the court reporter and she will read it back to you, or like whatever you think you may have missed or got wrong or whatever. Please do not ask questions of the court reporter. There's like so many different things. Like, this is crazy. Not in Tennessee, says L. Ron Butters. Not in Tennessee. You can't take those notes. So Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, you cannot take your notes. California, you officially can take your notes back with you when you deliberate. That is wild. That is absolutely wild. Yes, I was in the courtroom today. Wow. Jurors are all, again, I write, very somber and solemn. This is how much I just, it struck me, and it's very important. They're not talking amongst themselves as they walk into the courtroom, nor when they are walking out. All bad signs for the defendant, Danny Masterson. This is the first time I actually wrote after watching them for a while. The jurors are going to convict. I'm absolutely positive. Jurors 5 and 11 keep looking at the family. I think juror 5 was throwing like, she's a female, an older female. She was like, I think she recognized Jordan Masterson. I think maybe he wasn't in the courtroom before. You know, him being an actor, I guess he came in for support, but she probably recognized him and was like, what is he doing here? I don't know. She gave him like the dirtiest looks to the family. Not a good sign. None of the jurors, except for one, which we'll get to in a second, none of the jurors are looking at Danny Masterson. Like, remember how I told you in the Johnny Depp trial, juror number 5 and I think juror number 7 kind of glanced at Johnny right before closing arguments, or right before the close of testimony on the last day of testimony, before closing arguments the following day when I wasn't able to come in. They were kind of looking at him and they kind of gave him a nod or a smile or whatever. Go back to those videos. You'll see what I mean. They're on my channel. Nobody's looking at Danny. One juror number 1, an older white male, fires a glance at Danny Masterson during the reading of one of the instructions. I don't remember exactly which one. I missed that because I was so focused on watching him. He literally just kind of like fired a glance, kind of like, it was not a friendly one. I can assure you of that. And now this is, oh my God, this is crucial. So the instructions are very, very long. It took like 30 minutes probably for the judge to read them all. But there are certain points, like when you hear words like guilty, not guilty during the reading, you want to watch the jury, right? That's what I do. Like I gauge their reactions. Like when they hear words like guilty, not guilty, rape, right? Let me show you the instruction. This was the instruction. This by far is the highlight of today, 100%. So this is the instruction. This is the unmodified version. This is not exactly the version that was read in court because, you know, all of these things in brackets have their actual correct terms that were read today to the jury. The defendant is charged. Now this is against adult or minor. This is not, we're not dealing with any minors here. These are all adults. Rape by force, fear, or threats. This is number 1,000. The most important charge in this entire instruction. The defendant is charged in count whatever with rape by force. To prove that the defendant is guilty of this crime, the people must prove that 1, the defendant had sexual intercourse with a woman, 2, the woman did not consent to the intercourse, and 3, the defendant accomplished the intercourse by force, violence, duress, menace, or fear of immediate and unlawful bodily injury to the woman or to someone else. And again, the bracket language is all modified. And I know menace was used today, duress, force, and violence, I believe, as well. Threatening to retaliate in the future, that was removed. Because there's no retaliation. The prosecution agreed there's no retaliation if she comes forward or something like that. Threatening to use authority of a public office to incarcerate. Also, he's not in public office, so that did not matter. Sexual intercourse means any penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or genitalia by the penis. Ejaculation is not required. That was all read. To consent, this was read. A woman must act freely and voluntarily and know the nature of the act. A woman who initially consents to an act, this was also read, to an act of intercourse may change her mind during the act. If she does so under the law, the act of intercourse is then committed without her consent if, 1, she communicated through words or acts to the defendant that she no longer consented to the act of intercourse. 2, a reasonable person would have understood that her words or acts expressed her lack of consent. And 3, the defendant forcibly continued the act of intercourse despite her objection. It is not required that she physically resist, this was read, or fight back in order to communicate her lack of consent. Evidence that the defendant and the woman dated were married. Evidence that the defendant and the woman were married is not enough by itself to constitute consent. Maybe dated was too. I can't remember. But that was read. Evidence that the woman suggested, requested, or communicated that the defendant use a condom. This was read. Or other birth control device is not enough by itself to constitute consent. Intercourse is accomplished by force if the person uses enough physical force to overcome the woman's will. That was read. Duress was read. Duress means a direct. I don't think they use the word direct. Duress means implied threat of force, violence, danger. This was a big point that the defense and prosecution argued when they were arguing instructions. Violence, danger, or retribution that would cause a reasonable person to do or submit to something that she would not do or submit to otherwise. When deciding whether the act is accomplished by duress, consider all the circumstances, including the woman's age and her relationship to the defendant. Retribution was not read, as we said, because it's not part of the case. It's not one of the elements. Menace was read, means a threat, statement, or act showing an intent to injure someone. Intercourse is accomplished by fear if the woman is actually and reasonably afraid, or she's actually but unreasonably afraid and the defendant knows of her fear and takes advantage of it, I believe was read. A woman must be alive. Okay, that was not read because it's not an issue here. The defendant is not guilty of rape if he actually and reasonably believed the woman consented to the intercourse and actually and reasonably believed that she consented throughout the act of intercourse. I can't remember if this one was read or not. The people have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not actually and reasonably believe that the woman consented. If the people have not met this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty. I believe that section was read. Okay. Now, why is this the most crucial moment? Because as the judge goes through these definitions that I just read to you, as the judge goes through the reading of this instruction that is was read to the jury, a lot of them felt very uncomfortable. I mean, the conversation in the room is extremely uncomfortable, no question about it. But as the judge was going through all of these, there was a very noticeable tense aura in the room. Very noticeable. And jurors 3, 7, and 12 are the ones I noticed, and it was very evident. And 7, remember, the new 7, the old 13, she even had her hand like this. Like she was very, very interested because they know this is the most important job that they have. And the fact that they all perked up right as the instructions about what rape is, what constitutes rape, and how you're going to find or not find what rape is and find him guilty or not guilty, the fact that they all perked up tells me that they are. There's construction outside, you guys. Like, who gives a shit? I'm sorry. Like, come on. You're paying attention to noises. Pay attention to me. This is the main act right here. There is no cat here. There are no animals. It's just me and construction outside. The fact that they all perked up like that was a dead giveaway that they're very interested in this case and more than likely are going to convict. That's my prediction. I know news outlets are not able to use educated guesses. I'm not a news outlet. I am a disseminator. I'm an independent reporter. I'm a disseminator of truth and a disseminator of my opinion. And I can tell you, I can absolutely tell you that I sincerely believe that these jurors are on their way to convict Danny Masterson. Um, it's just I've been to too many cases. I've been in my own jury trials. You eventually get a feel for it. You eventually get, because when you're in the trenches, because reporters do these cases all the time, but when you're actually in the trenches, when you're actually in the shit and you're the one with the client who's got his ass on the line and you're the one who's arguing as to why they should not be convicted, and then you watch from the sidelines another jury making a determination as to whether or not they should or should not convict, and you're listening to their, the judge's instructions and watching their faces. I'm going to get another opportunity tomorrow. Tomorrow is closing arguments, and then they go to deliberate. They're going to reach a decision probably by Friday, because tomorrow is Tuesday. I don't imagine they're going to take longer than 2.5 days. So my prediction, we know closing arguments are tomorrow at 9 a.m. The prosecution and defense are going to close. The jury is going to go back to deliberate probably before lunch. And they're going to spend all the afternoon and some evening hours deliberating, no question about it. Afterwards, they're going to continue deliberations on Wednesday, and they're either going to have a verdict on Thursday or Friday, and he's going to be found guilty. I have no reason to believe otherwise. Now, some of you have been asking, what is the penalty for rape by force in California? It is rape is a felony in California. It carries a mandatory sentence of 3, 6, or 8 years in a California state penitentiary, fines up to $10,000, and a strike on your record per California's 3-strike law as a tier 3 sex offender. So I imagine this one is probably higher up there, and he's got 3 counts at least against each one of the 3 women. So yeah, it could be up to 11 years in prison if they're underage, which is not the case here, and 3 more if they sustain significant injury, which is not the case here. So there you go. We're going to continue this tomorrow, and I'm probably, since I did not anticipate for it to be over so quickly, I thought we're going to have a little bit more testimony, at least what we heard last week. There are actually 4 women, but only 3 he's been indicted on. Chuckles. 3 Jane Does. And there is no statute of limitations on felony cases. Great question, Bowman. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, by the way, if you haven't already. Yeah, there are no statute of limitations on felony cases, and this is a felony. So rape is a felony punishable up to 8 years in state prison. And it's a lifetime registration on the sex offender list under Megan's Law. Yeah. Okay. They can run either concurrently. That's a great question, Chunky Monkey. They can run either concurrently or consecutively. That is going to be up to the judge. I believe, do judges decide penalty in California? I don't know the answer to that. I think so. The judge will impose penalties based on arguments from both parties and jury. Oh, jury does make a recommendation. Really? Wow. Well, that's new. So they're kind of like a hybrid between Florida and Kentucky. The judge imposes penalties based on arguments and jury recommendation if there was a jury trial. If there was a bench trial, then they determine it alone, but this is a jury trial. Any other questions? These are great questions. Is the statute of limitations on felonies no, it's everywhere. There is no statute of limitations on felonies, period. Anywhere in the country. The defense, as I said in the beginning, you must have missed the intro, Pretty Mama Bear. The defense called 0 witnesses, including not calling Danny to the stand. Well, I don't think they can say life in prison because it's not one of the options. Were there any mistakes? I don't know what that means. But I think he's going to get convicted, as the title of my video suggests. So, not a whole lot of coverage on this. Now, after tomorrow, I imagine, since I'm here until Sunday, I thought, according to the conversations between counsel and the judge last week from the articles I was able to gather when I planned this work trip, I had no idea that they're going to end much earlier. The whole concept was they're going to have testimony Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then possibly Thursday, and then Friday closing arguments, and the jury goes out to deliberate. Well, turns out that's not going to happen. Turns out the jury is going to go out to deliberate tomorrow after they close tomorrow. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm probably going to go to the Harvey Weinstein trial, since it's literally happening right across the hall. That one is a little bit hard to get into. They only have like 18 seats for the public, and women occupy like all those seats. So I'm going to have to get up early and get there much, much earlier than I've been coming to this one. So be on the lookout. Harvey Weinstein coming your way. So this is the DUI guy signing off. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for joining me. I had a lot of fun doing this. Very informative. And I'm going to let you guys know. All right. See you all tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye.